I guess everyone can see my screen. Shekina is unavailable today, so I'm going to try to teach as well as be on top of my game on the chat. So if I'm not responding, please just quickly unmute and just draw my attention to whatever your question is. I would respond. Don't feel like I need to complete what I'm saying before you jump in. You can jump in at any time and stop me if I'm going too fast or if you don't understand or if you're getting any errors. Right? Let's try and make it as interactive as possible since we don't have anybody answering the questions on the chat. So we have gone over joins, the basic types of joins and the case statements. We did those last week. Today we will look at cities and temporary tables. Cities and temporary tables are almost the same thing. Temporary tables are pretty much like, should I say your views, right? I spoke about views at the end of the previous class. So your temporary tables are like views, except that they're only valid for the session with which you're running your query. And what I mean by that is, if I create, let me open a new page. If I create a new page like this and I create a temporary table, a temp table, for as long as I am on this window and I'm on this page and running, my temporary table is going to be valid. So, but if I close this window, right, then that temporary table has vanished. That's why the name is temporary table. However, for a view, when I create a view, remember we created one view last week under, I can't remember what database we created a view in, but we created one view last week. And if I run that view, it's still going to be valid, right? I'm going to search for the view now. Yeah, so the view was customer email. Now, if I take this away from here and I run this view here, right? I think it was under classwork, right? So if I run this view, it's still going to work. I remember what I said. When I run this view and say select from customers underscore email, there is really no table like this. What this is doing is it is running the code that I created right here, which is this code. It's running this code. It's just that I've sort of stored it under this name, under this view. So that's what a view is. However, a temporary table, if I create a temporary table on, say, this session of my query, and I take it to another session to run it, I close that session, right? It's not going to run. It's going to tell me that's an invalid object because it doesn't exist. So that's what it's called, a temporary table. So it's a table, but it's a temporary table. Okay. Now the syntax for temporary table, if you check your slides, is 1 second. Create temporary table. Most organizations, you just use when you see the name temp tables, then you know that it is like the temporary table. For SQL Server, if you want to create a temporary table, you can simply say select into, right? But for today, that's not what we're going to do, but let me just show you how that would work. So it says select into, and then you put 2#. I know someone here is using the SSMS window, so you could try it later and then maybe call it temp table, right? And then you write whatever it is you want to, your SQL query. Okay, but let's stick with what we are doing right now. So, so I would say select temporary table, give the table name, right? One moment. And then write my SQL. Because, so I didn't mention this, when you're creating temporary tables, just like when you're creating views, you're creating it off existing tables in your database, right? So you're creating it from tables that already exist. So you're querying from those tables and pushing it to a temporary table. Usually you do this when you're dealing with like very large and complicated queries or data sets where you cannot run everything in one go, right? Where it's either going to take too long to run, or logically it's not even possible to run everything on one go. Maybe you're trying to do a lot of self joins, like joining something that is in one table to itself over and over again. Usually the best way to go about it is to create temporary tables in different silos and then join them together as though they are multiple different tables you have on your database. So so you select column 1, 2, from whatever table. If you are joining tables, the same logic that you use when you're joining table, if it's a left join, for example, maybe from table 2 on, same pattern we use, and all the same conditions. So from here, this is just your regular select statement, right? The only difference or the syntax that tells you that it's to create a temporary table is simply create temporary table and put your temporary table name, right? Everything else that comes after, depending on whatever manipulation or analysis you want to do, still follows the same logic as your typical select query. Okay. So let's do one example. I want to go to where, let me just go to the one. Let's use BFN Bank. So let's assume I want to create a temporary table that has all the accounts that have status as one. This is just a very basic example, just so that we understand the syntax, right? So I want to create a temporary table that has all the account status that are equal to 1, right? So I would say create temporary table. Let's call it temp count, right? And then I will say select account number, depending on what I want to name, first name, last name. Right? So we are all familiar with this kind of query, with this statement. This is a very simple, basic statement. But if I want to create a temporary table named temp account that would contain this, let's run just this first. So this is what the query runs, but then when I do this, it will tell me that my table has been created. Now, if I come here and I select everything from my temporary account, there's this table I've created. You see that it gives me this, right? Now, like I said, if I take this and I close this session, and I open another one. Oh, it's still running. Well, because it's cached. But ideally, right, on many databases, this would not run, right? Now, if I close if I close my window, my machine, it takes so long for it to reopen, so I'm not going to close it. But if I close it and I relaunch my workbench, I can never see this temp account anymore. But for my view will always be here, right? And if I come and I refresh here, right, I would never see my temp account in the list of my accounts, right? But for this one, my view is here. So that's the difference between the view and the temporary account. Does anybody have any question regarding the difference between a temporary account and the view?
Sorry, at what point did this table show? Because when I ran mine, it didn't throw any error, but I can't find this table.
Which one? The temp account?
Yes.
Okay, when you run the create temp account query, right? It will just tell you that it's successfully created. Then you have to select from the temp accounts to be able to see the content of it.
Oh, okay.
So let me put it back just in case anybody. Have you seen it now?
Yes, it works. Thanks.
Okay. I know you can't see my hand because you're multitasking. Just as you're typing, so you're saying that for temp accounts, if you close this particular window, it ceases to exist, right?
Yes.
Okay.
However, for your view will always be there. So this is just like a bucket that holds a block of queries for temporarily, right? That's what your temporary account is. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at is cities, right? Now, cities are like temporary accounts, are like temporary tables rather, and they have a different syntax. However, the difference between a city and a temporary table is for temporary tables, you can index your temporary tables, you can assign constraints like your primary keys and all that, right? Because sometimes you're creating a temporary table that would have, say, millions of rows. You still want to add indexes, you still want to be able to create constraints on it to make querying it faster and easier. Now, with your cities, although very useful and very helpful as well, you are unable to create indexes on cities or create constraints on city. Now, the syntax for cities are with your table name. So in this case, it would be, I'm going to use the exact same query just so that we see the difference, right? With temp account as, or let me call this city account as, I'm going to put everything here.
I'm sorry, it's available. My temp account is returning an error.
Okay,
You
what
said
is
it must have at least one visible column.
did you put select after you said create temporary account, temp account, you wrote select and put all the columns from account.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. So here with cities, right? Now we're saying with you name it as then you put whatever it is that you're putting here. Like I always say, SQL is very similar to English. Approach it like you're saying, like speaking English. I think it's one of the programming languages that is the closest to English language, actually. So you have with cities as whatever it is I've defined my city as, which is my query. Then I'm now saying select all from this. So a major difference between city and temporary accounts, I said before, first of all, with the temporary account, you can apply constraints, you can apply indexes, but almost everything you can do with a table, you can do with a temporary table, right? Except that it disappears once you close that session. For the city is a part of a query. You see how when we created the temporary account, we were able to run it independently of selecting from that temporary table. Sorry, I keep saying temporary account. I mean temporary table. We were able to run it very independently of it. So we created the temporary table. It ran as a query on its own, and then we selected from it. However, we could have put this here. We could have put this here and run the two together. That's fine. But what this just tells you is that it would finish this whole block of code. So when you put codes together, it's called a block of code. It will finish this whole block of code completely before it runs this one. There are two independent blocks of code. But with cities run as one SQL block, as one SQL statement. Without this part here, the select, it is an incomplete code. It's throwing error because it cannot end like this. It's not going to run, right? So same query is going to give us same result because it's the same thing I'm calling, right?
Sorry, Beth. What do you use the CTE for? Sorry.
Sorry?
What's the essence of the CTE?
Okay. Yeah, so with, okay, let me just go to the examples already, then it will make sense. So let's assume that we want to create a list of average amount of active and pending accounts, right, from our BFM bank. So we need a list of average amount of both active and pending accounts. It's something that we want to do in stages. We want to do in blocks, right? So let's do this. First of all, I would create the average, right? All my averages. So if I say, let me create averages, right? So I'm going to say with I'm going to use example to answer your question of like what the use cases and like why it's needed. So I'm going to say with average amount as, and then let's say select average of transaction amount. Is it trans amount, transaction amount? I think it's trans amount. Let's call this average amount. Account number, transaction date, from PFN transactions. So we have to group by account number. Right? So this is going to give me something, right? So this is giving me the average amount for each account number, right? On each day. Okay. So I want the list of active and pending accounts. So I've created this into a table, right? That's what the city is doing. What the city is doing is the whole essence of data analysis, right, is that you are manipulating data, you are transforming the data to make sense out of it, to get insights, to do all sorts of things for decision making, right? And so there are times where the way the data is structured, the way the data is entered cannot give you the information you want. And so you have to do some sort of massaging. So here now, I want to get this average, right? And by the account status type, which is active and pending. So what I'm doing now is to make it easier or to make it doable, I'm doing it in blocks, in sessions. If I already had a table that gave me the average amount for each account number, I wouldn't need to do that. But since I don't have that, I'm sort of making the tables in the way I need it to be so that I can extract the information from it. So I would say I'll call this active customers or active account as
You didn't see the list after your active account.
no, so you mean with, right?
Yeah.
So it's only the first one that
Okay,
has
the calculation. Okay.
yes. So you say with this as this, you are now defining the second one as you're defining what that is, right? What this active account, you're defining what it is now.
Okay.
First name, last name. So this is our list of accounts that are pending, right? Like these ones. So if we run this, we have a list of the accounts that are either active or pending. Maybe say 1 is active, 2 is pending, right? And notice that if you're going to do this, in order to say join these two later, then you need to always still have a common key, because what SQL is doing is creating this as a table. Okay, Ogachukwu, your hands are up.
Yeah, please, can you explain what you mean by status in 1, 2? What does that mean, please?
Okay, so we learned about the in function in, I think, our first or second class. If you're trying to get a condition, so we're trying to get where account status, right, is either 1 or 2. So we can say where account status is equal to 1, or where account status is equal to 2. But imagine if there are, say, 10 values that you want to, filter through. Instead of saying where repeating account status is equal to this or like that, you can simply say in and list them, right? Is
All right.
that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, Mehitabel, but even my temp account is still not running. I've put all the table columns and it still says table must have at least one visible column.
That's this one here.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to drop the query you used? Let me see.
Hi, Metabel. Sorry, this city account, this city, what's the syntax? Like when you did the other one, I saw temporary table. So this one, what's the syntax? Is it this with or?
Yes. So that's what I used here. So you see with whatever city name that you're creating as, then you create, you write your SQL query, right? And then you can, just the way you have case when, so when you don't have to put the with again, you can keep listing as many cities as you want. You can put up to 50 cities, right? Like with, let's say city 1 as select staff from or select this, comma, city 2 as list another query, city 3 as, provided you need all these queries to achieve what you're trying to achieve, right? And then it's also possible for you to call the query, should I say now, to select from your first city in your second city. In other words, here can be, I don't know if I have any example I can give now. So if I have with average amounts as this, right, I can have average active accounts as this from accounts, and I can even do a left join, for example, average amount on accounts dot account number is equal to average amounts dot account number. Right? So your city, your second city can reference your first city as a table. Does that make sense?
Sorry, for me, I'm still trying to find out the usefulness of the CTE because I don't know. I was just thinking these queries, like the way you taught us before, can't we just run this thing normal? Why are we actually doing this CTE?
Yeah, so again, most of the data sets that you're seeing, they're sample and very short data sets. You will never see data sets like this. And so it's easy to say, oh, I can just run this straight and get it, right? However, the tables that you will set, we're using this table just so that you understand the principle, because if I'm using a large table, you wouldn't see the effects. Like you won't be able to eyeball it and say, oh, this is what this is doing, right? But with a smaller table, you can eyeball it and understand the concept and the logic. So just understand the logic, right? The truth is that let's say in the real world, 10 out of 15 queries, you will either need to use a city or a temporary table. I'm sure I use city every day when I'm querying the database. So understanding the idea and the concept of the city is very, very important, right? So that you can understand how it works. So in terms of use case is your tables will be so complicated. Your tables will not relate to each other the way you want them to relate to each other, right? And so you have to recreate. So what City is doing, what you're doing with City literally is that you're recreating the table to suit the way you want to do your analysis, the way the business needs the analysis, because the database is not structured that way, right? The database is structured to optimize maybe storage or so many other things. However, when you're doing an analysis as a data analyst, you may and you will almost always likely need to be able to maneuver with the data, to be able to transform the data in ways that different business units want. For example, also, you can have one table or one data set and different businesses need those data in different ways to achieve different things, like different business units, I mean. So the same business, but different business units. Maybe the marketing team wants to see the sales in a different way than the call center team, right? How whatever it is they're doing is affecting it. You probably would need a city to transform the data first before you do any sort of query finally and stuff like that. So yes, I understand how it might look like, oh, this is just a small table. I can just run this thing straight up. Yes, but just understand the syntax, understand the logic, and then when we go into, for example, for our project, we're going to give bigger data sets for the project, right? So Shekina will introduce the project, I think maybe today, if he's able to join us, or tomorrow. When we introduce the project, we're going to have a very large data sets. For the project, you will not be alone, we will work with you, but then you see where all of these concepts and all of these functions are very necessary to use. But for now, we just want to learn how to at least know the syntax and how to write it when we get to that bridge. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So is it safe to say City is like, so yeah, City is actually like temporary table, right? But with the difference between City is that City, you are writing, it's in one code. You can't separate them. So you can't run the City separately. For temporary tables, I can have 3 different temporary tables I'm using for whatever. And those blocks of code are run very individually. They're independent of themselves. Cities, they are not independent. You cannot run the cities like half and half. It has to be in one code. For example, let's do this. I think I can use this to explain. So now I've said select start from temp account, right? And let me do this. Okay. And I can do a left join or inner join, whatever, with the accounts table. Let's call this T to make things faster and call this A on T dot account number equal to A dot account number, right? So because I'm selecting star, it's going to give me everything in the temp table and everything in the accounts table. It doesn't matter. Let's just see. So you see that I'm running it very independent of this query where I created a temp table. However, with City, right? If I come here now and I say select the average amount, which is this one, right? If I run this, it's not going to run. It's going to tell me like average amounts does not exist. It has to be a part of the query. It's one query. That's the only way it will run. But it runs. Sorry?
I put my code in the chat a while ago.
Okay, I think someone explain that you put the semicolon, you remove the semicolon in the first create temporary table, temp account. Like, that's not the end. It's part of the code, if that makes sense. So when you wrote create temporary table, temp account, you need to remove the semicolon before the select.
Thank you.
Okay. So I was in the difference between the cities and the temp tables. I hope that's clear.
The city could also form like as an alias, right? Because what you're saying is everything. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so it could also form like an alias. You're essentially saying select all these and call it that name, and it stores the system, right? So you can query, whenever you query, you specify that name you are still with as opposed to the entire statement. That was right. That's what it is, right?
Yes, but then there is another. We'll go to subqueries. You will see the way subqueries work. So with subqueries, you're putting this at the back, just like an alias, right? You're putting this here, just like an alias. But then it's slightly different. It's slightly different from just an alias. So it's still that you are renaming this whole thing as this, but just the placement, the syntax is different with cities, right? But essentially, just as you can see, the way I run the temp tables, I'm running the cities, they are essentially doing the same thing. What it's doing for you is that it is storing a block of code, right, in the memory as a table that you can reference later. So
okay, I have a question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you know how you started your syntax with this to create the city, and you created average amount, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you also created active account. Is it safe to say you can create the first one, which is average amount, and end it there, then create another one, which is average and active account?
Mm-hmm.
Or must everything be in conjunction with the first syntax with? I don't need to get what I'm saying.
If you're doing that, then you have to do that using using a temporary table, right?
No, you create your CT, right? You create the first one, you call it average amount, right? And you create another one, you call it active amount. Is that the way it works?
Are you going to use with here?
Yes.
Okay. So if you do that, right? If you say, first of all, if you create this, if you do, this is not even a complete code. So if you say with average amount as this, right? Then it's asking you, what am I doing with this guy? Right. So with cities, it has to be a complete code. So if you say with this as this, right, then select maybe start from average amount, then that's a complete code. So cities are queries. You are querying something. So you are telling the system that you're trying to pull stuff, right? However, with temporary tables, those are completely different. I'm sure we understand that now. So with cities, this will not work because if I even say with average amount as this, with active as this, and I come and maybe select start from any of them, average amount. If it's not a part of this whole code, this will not run. This is going to give me.
Okay, so this is what maybe you don't understand what I'm trying to get at. See, you have two cities embedded in one, as far as I can see from here, right? The first one is average amount, and you wrote that syntax, and you select blah blah blah, and you called it average amount.
Yes.
But what you just said, now you need to close it by selecting all from average amount. That's how it ends, right?
If you want to stop there. Stop there.
I'm not saying if you stop there, you created average amount. Can you now create another one called active account and also stop there by selecting all from active accounts? Or are you saying everything must be aligned? You have to create average amount, active accounts, everything in one city.
I have a question for you. In your next city, are you going to reference this average amount like we are doing here?
What if you don't reference it?
If you don't reference it, then that's a completely different code. You don't like that. It's two different codes, right? So if you say with average,
you merge everything together, when you're referencing a column from the initial city. That's what you're saying, right?
No. But that is one case where you do that. So let me finish this one. Then you see. So here, right? I don't need to even reference it here. Let me remove this guy. I just wanted to show you guys that you can reference one from the other. Now, if I have this and I say, so I've gotten my average amounts, I've gotten my active accounts, and now for my final query, right? I want to select average amount. I want to select account number, transaction date, account status from average amount. That is the one I created previously. Let's say I give this alias as A and do an inner join, right, for active accounts. I call this A on okay, so you see here, what's the whole essence for the city is that at the end of the day, I want to do something, right? I have like a final query. I want to run a query. But with the query I want to run, I don't have those tables in the structure with which I want to run it. So here I want to run a table, two tables together, join them on their account number. But the way this table is structured, it doesn't give me that. And so I've created this table in a way that I've called it average amount in the first table structure I need. And then the second one, I've also gotten a list of it in the second structure the way I need it, right? And then finally, I want to merge these two tables, which is this one, average accounts, and then active accounts. So I don't necessarily need to be calling it here. I could have had, say, 4 different cities, right? And then in my final query, maybe I'm trying to do a join for those 4 different accounts. Sometimes your cities already have several joins, right? To be able to achieve what you're trying to do. So what cities does is they optimize your query in the sense that instead of writing everything together in one join, joins are expensive functions, by the way. So instead of writing all of them in a long join or in a way that it makes it more expensive to run, you've grouped them in small tables or in different tables in a way that your final query is easy. Also, for readability, cities are also good to make it easy for your queries to be read, right? You see how which is why I was trying to do this to show you how I've structured. Anybody that comes to read my code now comes and sees, okay, this is the first thing I did here. This is the second thing I did here. And then finally, I put the two together to be able to get what I'm trying to do. If somebody wants to come, maybe there's an error somewhere, instead of trying to figure out how to fix the error on a whole block of code, you can just come and see the area where that error was, right? Now, if I run this average amount, I want to run, 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 I want to run So if I run this, I've gotten the average amount for each transaction date for those that are won, right, active and are pending. So I've gotten that list. So does this answer your question that you were asking about whether like you need to always have to reference it? You don't always have to reference it in the other cities, but then it will be a pointless city if you don't need it at your final stage of your query, right? It could be,
at the end of the day, you're just selecting from all these plenty cities to get what you want.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Ogachukwu.
So I just want to get in summary, what is a city? Are you saying a city is when you now bring out a clause and say as, like you use example like active accounts as we want to query this, or what is even a city in summary, just in a layman's term?
Okay, in the layman's term, right? I don't remember what the full what's it called, the full name or what C and T and E is, to be honest with you. But cities basically they're like views, right? Or like look at them like derived tables. They are tables that don't exist on the system, right? But you need those tables based off on information on data that is already on the system. So they are literally derived tables that they make complex queries easier to write. So if actually in the number 2 of the assignment, right, the easier way to write them, I have it, but I don't think I should show you. But how you see tomorrow, we'll see how we've used cities to answer those questions. But I really wish that we can understand the idea of cities. Go back to our number 2 for the assignment and try to see how we can use city or temporary tables, whichever one you're most comfortable with. But cities are easier because it's one block of code, right? It's one code. If you don't need to create maybe indexes or constraints on your derived tables, cities are the easier way to go because they are faster and they are easier to use, right? So it reduces the complexity of your query, city, basically. Some of these things, like you've rightly said, we could have done them maybe using joins and all sorts of things. But what city does for you is it just simplifies it in different blocks. And then at the end of the day, you just reference all those different blocks that you have created as single tables, as single derived tables. Does that make sense?
Okay. Kind of. I'll stay with this.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So so the syntax is just also understand the syntax. You're saying with whatever you're creating as you put your query, right? And your query in that block, right? It's just a typical query. The same syntaxes, the same functions. Select whatever you need to select, group by, if you're using having, if you're using a where to filter out, right? And then you just can create as many cities as possible, right? And then you can create as many cities as possible. And in your final query, you either reference it. Sometimes what you need to create multiple cities for one particular thing, right? This could have been a city, this one. So maybe this was not the final query. You just needed this to be able to join with something else, right? And so this could be, so a city can be from several cities that you've written in that same line of code, right? So just try to understand the concept. You're just making a complex query easier and this constructing it. There are times where there are no other ways to go about approaching some business questions without using cities, honestly. So okay, so you said whether the city is temporary. Yes, in fact, it's more temporary than the temporary table because it only runs within the code. Like once you cannot just select randomly from like average amount or select from active accounts as a separate query. This, in fact, if you run this, so you start from here and run all of this. If you do this, let's see. This guy, it's going to be 30 something. So if you remember when I did a join, right, on this, let me do it again. Common table expression, thank you. Yes. So left join average one. I'm going to delete this. I just want to show us something. Right. So if I run this just from here, even if I put the width and I run this, it's going to throw me an error because first of all, there's no such table as average amount, right? Average amount is not a table, even though it was here. We ran it previously. It stores it only within the query. Anything outside of that query, that block of query you're writing, it does not exist. It's as good as any other code that you ran previously and deleted. But your temporary table is stored for a time. Your views are stored even after you close and open your system. Is this clear? I hope this is clear.
Feel like we lost everybody.
Yes. This we're getting into the complicated part of SQL.
Yeah, see, I understand the fact that it acts like a temporary, like an alias, right? I'm trying to wrap my head around why you need it as such. Maybe because the data set you're using to visualize it is kind of small. I understand the concept, right? I think something like this came up in the assignment. We were trying to get average or something. We're trying
exactly.
To yeah.
When you're trying to get all those average of this one, and then you're going back, give me the average and then the percentage of the average. You might need to create part of it first. And then exactly, because it's not something that you might be able to do at once. You might be able to do it at once, but it might complicate, especially if you're doing like referencing the same table again a second time. So yeah, it's when you start having that's why it's used for when it's like a complex query, that's when you start introducing cities. So this is, should I say, intermediary level for SQL. When you're getting to your intermediary level, you're talking about cities, temporary tables, and then what we want to talk about now, which is subqueries. Yeah, but subqueries are a bit easier to understand, right? I hope so. But I want us to all get this part. I really want us to understand it, because it's almost also any SQL, like, I mean, we're learning this for our knowledge sake as well, but usually when we go for interviews and stuff like that, one way to really impress interviewers or to approach questions and make it look like, making them know that you know what you're doing is when you start introducing things like cities, temporary tables, because that's how standardized queries are written, especially when they are complicated and complex, right? So I would really want us to get to grasp these concepts. Yeah.
So sorry, Melissa, but what part of this query did you run to get your table? Is it everything or just this last part?
Everything. You have to run everything. With cities, it's a whole query. You cannot break it like in how you run it. It's a whole query. You have to run everything from the width. That's where your query starts from to the end. You can't even run half. You can't run only from width to this part. It will not run.
I want to find out if you're going to. I know that SQL generally is different from SQL in Salesforce marketing. Will you talk about SQL in Salesforce marketing? Because I know it's not as complex as this, but do you have the knowledge to talk about that anyway?
SQL in what?
In Salesforce Marketing Cloud.
Oh, I'm not sure I know what Salesforce marketing is. Sorry?
That is totally different class.
Okay.
No, I understand. It's SQL knowledge that applies as well, but I know there's some kind of variations a little bit. It's not as complex as it, but I wanted to see if you...
Oh, you mean the SQL that is used on Salesforce to query on
Salesforce? Yes.
Oh, right. Funny exactly. Thing is, I'm just getting introduced to that. If you understand SQL, actually, because I'm just getting introduced to querying on Salesforce, it's pretty much similar, right? It's pretty much similar. But if you have any questions, we can take it out of this class and then we can walk through that together. But in terms of basic SQL knowledge, that's what we're trying to work on. But yes,
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Any other questions before we jump to let me do one more example.
Mine is showing error.
Okay,
hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, it's showing error. The moment when we put in our joins, this OCT query is showing error. When we first put the inner join before the final query, somewhere around list of active and pending accounts, there was a kind of not inner join, sorry. Is it left join? I think it was a left join.
Where?
Yeah, when we put that left join somewhere around that's before final query. Yes. Yeah. When we put left join, it ran well. I did that and it was fine. But the moment I removed it, then I started getting error. This week, the no more showing me these blue dots, just give me a red whatever straight up. And since
then try to look at your query to see what is different from what we have here. Or you can post it on the chat. I'll look at it for you.
Okay, I'll post it on the chat. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. I've posted it on the chat as well, just so that we can check it out and do whatever comparing. Okay. Time is kind of gone. I'm going to just put another query that I had that I wanted us to look at together on the chat, and then later on you can go back and also look through it and study that query to see. Okay, so I'm going to put that so that we can move to subqueries and then try. Yeah, so you can look at that one later on, run it as this one to see what the output is, right? This is when you're running this, run this on the classwork. Use classwork, don't use what's the word, BFM Bank, right? Okay, but now let's go to subqueries. So for subqueries are a bit I think easier. Subqueries are simply just queries that where you do like a nested query in a query, right? So for example, I say select account number from, right? I open another one. What am I selecting it from? So I said select account number Okay, so this is an example of a very simple subquery, right? This is an example of a very simple subquery. Here, I'm saying select account number from this. So maybe, oh, I want only the account number at the end of the day. Again, it looks like, oh, why don't I just select the account number? Very true. But there are situations where you might need this, right? So maybe, okay, I'll give you this thing. So if I do this, it's going to give me the account number. So you see that I'm selecting account number from this whole, everything here is a query. I'm calling it a subquery because I am putting a query inside a query. So all of these here, they're kind of also like subqueries, right? So these are also called subqueries because they're queries inside queries. So cities are made up of subqueries. Yeah. Cities are essentially made up of several subqueries, right? But this is a typical subquery. Now, I could also say select from this, right? And then continue and say where count status is equal to less than 2. Or I don't know if there is anyone that is. So what have I done? I'm selecting this account number from this here is my subquery, right? See what I was telling you about where your alias for your subqueries, right? If it's cities, you don't need to name your subqueries. But for subqueries that are not cities, you need to name your subquery here. Like you need to put an alias for your subquery.
Question. If you're using this subquery, you're selecting account number from this select statement, right? And you're calling that statement account.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, this one I'm calling. So I'm calling this. Yes, is this one I'm calling out.
You want to bring out just account number from another query.
Yes.
Account number, first name, last name.
Yes.
So why didn't you just go ahead and select account number and transfer?
Exactly what I'm saying. That yes, and I mentioned that you might think about it and say, why don't you just get the account number from this one? While this is true, just understand the concept, right? That with subqueries, like I'm trying to use because if we use complicated scenarios where it only makes sense for this, it will be difficult for you to be able to see what it's actually doing, right? Because there will be no other way to show you. So here I can show you now that, see the account number here, it's a small table, and then I'm bringing out only the account number out of it, and then you can see that, okay, it matches what I'm saying, right? Now, I'm doing this to show you just how this works. So for example, if, let me see if I can think of an example for subquery. If I'm trying to get, okay, so let's say I do this. Let me use another example. So I'm saying select some trans amount. Let's call this. I'm trying to get count distinct number. That's volume, right? And then what else can I do? Transaction type, trans type. That is so small. I don't know what to do with it. Let me see. Translate, right? So I'm going to put that amount and translate. Okay. Now, okay, so So what I want to try to do now is I'm trying to get for each account number, right? So for each account number, I want to get the total average, like the average of everything divided by their own sum of transactions. Does that make sense? So in a whole table, right? So for example, if we check this table now, maybe I don't need the trans date, right? So if I have this table, I'm trying to think of, I didn't think of this scenario before, right? So I'm just trying to think of a scenario so that you can understand how it can be a simple table, but it could be complex and you need to use subqueries or you need to use CTs. So for example, let's assume that we have this, our transaction tables, and what we want to get, for example, would be for each account number, we want to get the division of the sum of their transaction divided by the general average of all the transactions, right? So if I want to do something like that, what I'm thinking is to use a CTE, right? Actually, not a subquery. So I can have my first table to be, let me remove this. I can have the first table to be this. So if I have the first table to say the value is this and the volume is this for everything together, and then I have another one. So let me just use this to explain that CT actually makes sense. So with total average, right? As I do this. Individual So this is the individual account, right? So let's see, average would be AVG. This wouldn't make sense. So let's remove this guy. So now I can say the left, right. I don't know if this even makes sense, but let's see. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, this is very random, right? Whatever it is we're trying to achieve here. But you see how we are taking the average of credit transactions and then we're dividing it by each person's individual sum of transaction amount. So there are things like this where you may need to do, if you want to do this in one query, it's almost not possible actually, because you need the total average of the transaction amount from this exact same table where you are trying to get the individual amounts. Does this scenario, does it make it easier to see a use case for CTE? Did anybody even follow what I was doing? Hello, is anybody?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, this scenario, because, like I said, in the assignment, there was some type of question like this, and then this will give credence to answering that question.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to do.
I mean, to take understanding for that, but then I think I get the idea behind it.
Okay, so it is just to make complex situation, to break it down in pieces. Same thing with the subquery, right? To break it down in pieces so that we are able to solve a complex situation with the queries. So CTEs, subqueries, temp tables, they are simply to just take to make things that are complex, like to break it down into simpler bits to be able to solve the problem at the end of the day. So this will just, okay.
I wanted to ask if you can add a join statement here. So if you are selecting it from a set of table and you are joining, okay, let's join on, then you can now put where is equals to, right? Where something equals to this.
Exactly. Once you understand the different functions, right? Understand what they're doing, that your where is filtering out something for you. If you needed to filter out anything at this stage, you use your where clause. If you need it, so just understand the functions and what they do, understand the syntax of how you can go about it, and then marry everything together. Cynthia, you can't be lost, we'll find you. So what part is confusing to you?
I think it's still the CTE, because that was what you did here now, right?
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's where I'm still confused.
Okay, so do you know what we're trying to achieve here? What we're trying to do here, right, was we were trying to compare each person's individual transaction amount based on the transaction type. We're trying to get Doka. So just listen to what we're trying to do, then we'll look at it together. We're trying to get each person's individual transaction based on transaction type. So for your credit transaction, account number 1009, I'm trying to get your transaction and compare it with the total average of credit transactions. So my credit transaction amount in comparison with the average transaction amount in the account, in the database, what is it, right? So that's what we're trying to do now. If we're trying to do that, because first of all, what do we need to do? First of all, we need to get the total average. We need to get what is the average of the transaction amount in the table in database, right? So we will say here, the first thing here was get total or get average, right, of transaction amount by transaction type. By transaction type, just mean per transaction type, right? So that's what we did here. That's what we did in the first one. And then if we run this query just from the select, right, to this point, we can see that, okay. If we run this query, we can see that, okay, the average debit transaction amount is $70. The average credit transaction amount is $38. Now we want to say, how does this compare with the individual's transactions, right, in their account. So I also want to get all the sum, because remember now that sometimes the individuals in the table have multiple, they could have multiple debit transactions, they could have multiple credit transactions. So I want to be able to get the sum of their transactions per the transaction type for each account number. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get sum of individual, not really individual, call it sum of account transactions, right? By transaction type. So now I got this, I have this data, I have this data. If I run this, you see that it's giving me the sum, right, of all the transactions by the transaction type. So 1009's credit transaction, the sum of it is 64. 1009's debit transaction, the sum of it is 50, right? So if I want to see how it compares, I need to just divide this guy by the average credit transaction. I need to divide this one by the average debit transaction that we got here, which is this. So I need to divide the first one. I think it was, that guy's one was, I can't remember, by 70, right? 1009. Now, that's what I've come to do here. So I'm going to divide this one by these values that we have here, right? For each of them. I can even come here to say, to also add a left join for account, because I want their first name and last name, right? Who has account number? All of these things I'm doing now, we've done them before, so I hope this part will not confuse anybody. I just want to make it look pretty.
I was gonna say you should
Tell me.
I was gonna say you should please explain this line. That's when you say D value, and just explain it in English, like translate what you're saying.
Okay. So what I'm doing here is I am selecting this value that we got here for the individual sums, actually not, for the individual sum, right? This value here. I'm taking it and I'm dividing it by the total average that we got here, that we created here, right? For each of them. So I'm creating them and I'm calling it div value, right? I'm getting the account number. I'm getting the first name and last name as the full name and the transaction amount, right? For each account number. So if I run this now, so I'm now saying the account number, the Morgan Wolf's credit is 1.5, 1.65 income, like when you compare it, right, with the average, right, of the total credit values in the database. But do we get what we're like? First of all, do you understand what we're trying to do? Who does not understand what we're trying to do? Forget about how we did it. What we tried to do with this query. Cynthia and Dorcas, do you understand what we're trying to do with this query?
So sorry, you're trying to calculate the average, individual average, right?
No, we're trying to compare the individual sum of transactions for each account with the average of the transaction amount. So it's like saying, okay, what in the way this makes sense really would be, say, I want to know those that are above average, those that are below average, right? I want to compare the accounts, their transaction amount, those that are spending or having a turnover that is above average or having a turnover that is below average, right? In terms of what's going on in the database. My customers, these are my customers that have credit and debit transactions. Who are the customers that are performing well? Who are those that are not performing well, right? In terms of comparing with the average. Now, the way we're going to go about it is we want to say, what is the average credit transaction amount? The average credit transaction amount, we've seen that it is $70. And the average debit transaction amount, we've seen that it's $38, right? So I need to now sum the transaction amount for each of my customers, their debit transactions, their credit transactions, and compare it with this average, right? With this average of everything in the account to see how they are performing, their performance. So in terms of the English part of it, like the idea of what we're trying to do you get it now?
I have a
kind of get it,
question of
but
clarification.
My own point is that can't we use their own average spending in comparison to the average of the total transaction? So I think they're using their sum, compare their average. That's where I'm lost. To compare with the average of, let me just come again, like what you explained, the total of, we are getting the average of credit transaction, getting the average of debit transaction, and then we are looking at each customer. We will sum up their own credit transaction and compare with the average. So I'm like, I have to take the average of an individual spending or something or credit and compare with the average of the total transaction instead of their own sum. That's where I'm.
That's where you're confused, but you understand, like, okay. So if you want to do that, if some of these things are like business rules. If a business unit is saying the way we want to track performance is by using the sum of the transactions, and for whatever reason, that is how they pull that, right? Then we'll use this. However, what you're saying is that instead of using the sum, you want to use the average of their transaction amount instead, right?
Yes. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
So mathematics, kind of.
Okay, so it's the mathematics of it that you are saying we should.
Yeah, I became confused that. Yeah, that's where I was lost. Well, I may be wrong. I'm throwing it to the house. Well, like you said,
what you're saying is all like it depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? Like I said, with this now, we just created this scenario on the fly. My point is, I want you to see how without putting this in cities and in blocks, you will not be able to achieve this calculation. Do you get?
Okay, so my next question would be, I didn't see CCTV like I saw CCTV the other time. So is this CCTV? Is all these things as representing CCTV? The other time you wrote CCTV, and the other one we did, there was somewhere you put CCTV.
No, we just said with email address, let me go to that first one. We said with average amount as this one as this, right? And then we wrote our final query. Basically the same thing now we're saying.
This is how we write CCE. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I'll go to you very well now.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know who is talking because but I can see so many chats on the. I'm going to also put this here. Okay, so you said I should explain how the query relates with the alias. Which part of it?
I know you are comparing the two values, right, from two different tables. So you said that you want to get the value from, I guess the value 1 is in another table called table A, right? And then maybe the value 2 is another table called table B. So are you saying now that if I'm to interpret your syntax, you are selecting both values as the value, and then you're going to add the account number from a specific table that you have named A or alias A. And then when you do the concatenation and then transaction type. So the fourth line, as in if you scroll down a little bit, that is where, if you now look at left, that join statement now. So when you join your total average on B, so the total average is from a separate table, right?
The total average is our first city that we made. We said we total average as this. So we created total average using this query, right? So now we're calling total average. We're now naming it B just so that, we can, instead of typing the whole total average here, we just type B. And then this indiv average, right?
Yes.
We created it here. So we called indiv average, all of this, we called it indiv average, so that when we are selecting from indiv average, now we're naming it A, just so that when we are putting our alias, so this is just our normal join that we do, right? And then here on accounts, I didn't give account alias, so I'm calling the whole account. I'm typing it out fully, right, as account number. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So the last one, just last clarification, please. So when you have transaction A and transaction B, that's one, the one above it, after the on statement. So when you, scroll down. Yes, where your cursor is at that. Yes. So that's where I just want to help me explain. The A, you name transaction type A from the last value you got, right?
Yeah. So in the two tables, which is our, let's say A and B now, right? We call this A, we call this B. What we have on those tables, we have value 2 on this, and we have transaction type. And here we have value 1, we have transaction type, we have account number. So I'm joining on the transaction type, right?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay. So for subqueries, they're similar, very similar. I showed us the syntax, except that it will be difficult for me now to come up with a scenario where that's the only time it will be needed, right? But just so we know that there are several scenarios where that's what you would need to do. And then understanding that you can select from, we can select from a select statement, because that this select statement will become like your table. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's very similar to what we're doing here. So this select statement becomes like your table. So I'm just going to give an example. If we understand cities now, hoping that we understand it, this should be like also very straightforward, right? And we can add all sorts of conditions here, where we can even do like a left join. Because what you just need to know is that when you say select star from and you call this by itself is a table. So whatever you would have done with a table, right, you can do it with this. So you can say select star from. This actually makes more sense for where. So essentially this is just how subqueries work, right? So we're querying like inside the query, right? So another way you can see subqueries could be you can use subqueries in your filters, right? So you can say select, let's see, start from transactions, right? Where let's say account number. Let's say you want to, so this also, it also could be helpful where in times where you want to do a filtering from another account, and like doing a left join is just going to make it too long or something. Right. So this is another like way you use subqueries. And just so you know, if you're using this as a filter, right, you cannot have like multiple columns here, because remember now you're saying where account number, and then you're doing all of this, right? So it's another way you can use subqueries. So the concept of subquery is just very straightforward. It's just using a query inside a query, right? To call whatever it is you want to call. And then here, your subquery is acting as another table. So they're just like, again, the same way you have subqueries, storing data in the format you want to use it in your larger query. Does this make sense? Do we have any issues with this? Is this clear?
I have no concern.
Tell me.
So your first subquery, you're selecting all from that statement, and you call this A. Mm-hmm. So if you're called it A, how is your inner join relating to the query? So as opposed to the just an India, right?
Yeah. Okay. So is this A? So where A dot account number? Yeah.
Just an alias, so you can always still do your join based on your select statement from the top query.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Let's try to type it also. Like, don't just copy and paste, because if we type it, then it sticks. When you make mistakes, you're able to check like where you're getting it wrong. I'm pasting the queries in the chat just so that we're able to compare with what we have, right? But try as much as possible to type as well, follow it. Like, and then even after the class, try to, use the other database to think of scenarios and see how you can manipulate and play around with it. And then for the assignment 2, right, go back, look at it, even those that have done it before, and see simpler and more efficient ways using either cities or the subqueries, right, to do that. Okay, I really want us to get our Power BI up and running today. And so I'm just going to ask if there's any question, and then we'll finish this up. We touched on views last class. I'm not going to look at that. And then a stored procedure basically is, stored procedures are like subroutines, right? So you see the way you have cities that are running things sequentially. Stored procedure is kind of similar, but stored procedures it's almost like a loop. Think of it like a loop where you can iterate something over and over and over again in one line of code. We're not going to go deep into stored procedures really, because then we're getting into like advanced SQL. So I'm just going to explain the concept of stored procedure in our material. The syntax is there. But the elements of the stored procedure is you create your stored procedure and your stored procedure name. Let me just put it here, but we're not going to like do any major example. I'll just put it and show you the structure. Let me create a new tab. I'm creating so many tabs now, right? So in your stored procedure, right, you're creating the stored procedure and the procedure name, right? And this your stored procedure name, every single time after you create a stored procedure, it creates it like, you see where you have a view here, you create it like under this bucket where you have the stored procedure. And whenever you want to call your stored procedure, all you have to do is to execute it. So you have execute, and then you write your stored procedure name. Let's call this our procedure name as procedure name. Now you see that there is a bracket here. In your bracket, you define your variables. Your variables in your stored procedure are, as the name implies, variables. What is not constant. So for example, your variable can be date, your variable can be maybe it can be anything, it can be transaction type, but whatever is not going to be a constant in your query. So let me give you a typical query that you can use as a stored procedure. Very simple one. Again, we cannot go very deep. We don't have the time and capacity right now to go so deep into stored procedures. So I just want to give us like a general overview of it, right? At the end of the course, I will drop some links, materials where we could like learn more about this. But so imagine you have this, right? Select this. We do good. So imagine we have this. And then for this query, for example, we always there's something that there's an application that feeds off this information. And every single time we want this information, your application needs to run something. So we can create that as a stored procedure, right? And every single time the application needs the number of credit transaction or the number of customers, it needs to run that stored procedure, right? And so what we can do, let's say the variable is the date. So when you go to your mobile app, for example, and you type in maybe whatever dates, variables, right? So there's a drop down where you put the start date and the end date. And then when you click on enter, it would do some sort of things. In this case, running this stored procedure and bring back a result. What this is doing is you having here as your variable. So we'll call this variable start date, right? And then this one could be end date. Now, when you have something like this, right, this is like a stored procedure. And then these are your variables. Your start date and your end date are your variables. So that every time you select whatever date, it comes and it's, what's the word now? Automatically or dynamically puts in the date and then runs this query. So when you're creating a stored procedure, you create the name, in this bracket, you put the variables, right? And then the syntax is begin, you declare your variables here. I'm going to declare that start date is equal to date, right? The date type, and then end date is equal to date. So I'm going to say that that is my variable. Here where you have procedure logic is literally your SQL query, right? That's this one. And then end. That is your stored procedure. Kind of simple, but a bit more complicated. But the syntax is very straightforward. The elements of your stored procedures are your stored procedure name, declaring your variables, right? Your procedure logic, and then your end. When you call your stored procedure, right, or execute your stored procedure, depending on the machine you are working with, you put in your variable. Sometimes your stored procedures doesn't need to have a variable, but if that's the case, then you might as well just write an SQL query, right? So when you execute or call your stored procedure and then you put in your variables, it will run that logic that you have put in here, right? And then retrieve whatever information you want. Also, what I would do is I'm going to give a simple stored procedure for how debiting and crediting an account works, right? No, date add is not a stored procedure. Date add is a date function. So with date add, you can use this as a filter. You can use it as anything. But date add is a function. This is just a syntax for date add. A stored procedure is a whole procedure. It's a whole SQL query, right? You can declare your dates as date add, right? You can declare a date variable using date add. And so every single time you run your stored procedure, it will give you 7 days behind. So date add, what you just gave me now is like when you're trying to maybe do a weekly report or a weekly something and you want it to always count 7 days prior from whatever dates, either on your system or get date, that is the system date, right? So yeah, so that's just general idea of stored procedure. It's a procedure that you can always call or you can always execute over and over again, right? And it's you declare your variables. Your variables are what is not, in quote, constant, is what you want to be dynamic in your procedure, right? I'll drop a procedure statement and it would be detailed, telling you the steps just for us to have an understanding of how a typical stored procedure is. However, we will not be able to actually dive deep into creating a stored procedure in the class because of time. Another important part of what we need to do is our visualization. I was hoping really that everybody will have it installed for the next class. And so we'll need to jump into that. But before that, please, does anybody have any question at all? Anybody? Okay. If nobody has questions, right, then I guess we can move to better things. So I want us to, I don't know how many people have Power BI desktop on their computers. If you already have Power BI desktop, fantastic, great. If you don't have, I just dropped a link on the chat. You can go there, right? And then where you see Microsoft Power BI desktop, please click on the advanced download options, actually, not on download. Actually, if you have a Mac, you would not be able to install Power BI on your system. You will need to create a remote machine, a Windows remote machine for that. I have a Mac, and that's the way I'm able to use my Power BI. Are we still there? So quiet.
I have a question on the link you pasted. So they said advanced download options on that
Yes.
Power BI
desktop. Yes. So when you go, you'll see, when you click on it, you'll see a blue button that says download. So you just click on that. You might see where it's asking whether it's 32 bits or 64 bits. You can check the properties of your computer to see whether your computer is 32 or 64. Most likely to be 64. And so so yeah. Anybody having issues downloading it, let me know. I really want everyone to have it before we leave this class, just so that next week we can start.
Yes, sorry, when I click on the link, for me, I can't find advanced button.
When you click on the link,
Power BI, when I click on the link, yes, I'm on Microsoft Power BI, overview, product, then pricing. Then when I went down, I saw some tiles like Microsoft Power BI desktop. Okay. Under that, now I've seen it. I think under that I have advanced download option.
Yes, under Microsoft
Power BI.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So then I have Microsoft 365 for one person, and I go ahead and then download Power BI desktop. Is that what you're downloading?
Yes, download. You see one blue.
Yeah, desktop. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mehitabel. You did say that for those that have a Mac, do you mean like we have to create like a Windows partition to be able to?
Yep, exactly. That is what we need to do. I use Microsoft Remote Desktop. If you have the M1 chip, you might not be able to create the partition, right? But if you don't, if you have any the OS before M1, then you're fine. You can create the partition and you'll be good. If not, you may need to get the Microsoft Remote Desktop app. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that. Thank you.
I might choose. I might choose PBI desktop set of X64. Oh, that's what X64.
I can't hear you.
Option is giving me.
Sorry?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Choose the download you want. It's now, there are two types of download. There's one that's PBI desktop setup.exe. There's another one, PBI desktop setup _ X64.
Use the 64.
You go for the X64.
Yes, the 64, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And then when we're done downloading, to install, just like every other Microsoft installation process, just keep clicking on next until you get to finish. Very straightforward. And then we should have something like this. Let me close this column.
Power BI does not use personal account for signing.
No. So for
there a way you can circumvent that situation?
No, for the desktop, right? We're not going to do any sort of collaboration, right? So just download the desktop. We will just create our visuals, but we will not share. We will not use the service part of it. Next class, I will give a little walkthrough on Power BI and the different layers and ways to use Power BI. However, for this class, because we're going to just be using the desktop to create little visuals, we will not need to sign in, create any account or stuff like that.
Question, are we going to go into Tableau as well?
No, we would not. But the principle really is kind of the same. Once you're able to use Power BI, Tableau will not be very there's too many BI tools, right? It's best to really just understand how to the concept and the logic for visualization, and then you can apply it to all of them. Okay, is anybody having issues?
Okay, sorry, if I understood what we're saying, because I was trying to install. We're not going into Tableau.
No.
Yeah.
Would you prefer us to go into does the class prefer Tableau to Power BI?
I don't know. I don't know anymore. I think trying to get that.
The good thing with Power BI the good thing with Power BI is with the desktop is completely free. Tableau, right? You have only 14 days trial. Afterwards, it's a bit more complicated. But with Power BI, you can create as many visuals as you want. You can save them as your PBX files. If you don't need to share, you really don't need to subscribe, right? You don't need a license. So if we're trying to create, say, like a portfolio, which at some point, like most of whatever we do in class, we can keep it as a portfolio, something that we've worked on. It's nice to have to use Power BI. There's the public Tableau, but so many limitations with that. So many things you can do with Tableau. Nelly, have you used Power BI before? So is there anybody having any challenge? Are we done? Done. You should, when you're done, what's the word now? Installing, and you open your Power BI. I'm looking, I need everyone to see this page before we go today. I know it's past time. Let's just try to get it done so that the next class, we will just go into it, right? I'm just going to give a sample. This is like a sample dashboard, right? So we may not go into very detailed dashboards, right? But we'll learn how to write simple DAX, create simple measures, how to create some visuals, and just how to play around with Power BI. There's so many.
Because of time, are you saying is it because of time we're going to deep
visualization? Yes, because Power BI course on its own is a 4 to 6 week course just for Power BI. Do you get? So for this data analytics course we're doing, we're putting together basically the very important things, what you need to know, right? And the things that you need to know kind of situation. So you see, for the visualization and Power BI, I will definitely give the details of the concept of visualization, what it's used for, the different the layout for Power BI, how to create certain measures, how to create visuals and things like that. But for example, there are so many functions in DAX, that even as you learn Power BI and as you keep using it, you keep learning them. Power BI releases new functions in DAX as time goes on, right? So one set of people that I would, or one YouTube channel that I always recommend, I can almost swear by them, is Guy in a Cube. If you're really interested in Power BI, always follow them. Like, they release videos of new functionalities that are released in Power BI. And so you can keep yourself abreast with that, right? But for this course, the basics and the functions that you need to be able to start any job as a data analyst, you'll get that here. However, there are way more functions that we have. Even
Guy in the Cube.
Sorry? Yes, Guy in the Cube.
Guy in the Cube.
Yeah, Guy in the Cube. They're very good. Like, if for me, I always use that to like keep up, because there are times where you think, oh, the Power BI is limited with this functionality, but maybe during their last updates, they already added that functionality. You say you can't sign in successfully. Don't try to sign in, because you probably don't have an account yet. But do you have this canvas? If you have this canvas, then kudos, we're good to go.
Yes, I have the space that tells me to add data to your report. Yes, this one.
Fantastic. So if we all have this, then we could what's the word now? Call it a day, and then tomorrow, after we go over the assignment, we'll go over the assignment really quickly, because we have done a lot with SQL, and then we can start our dashboard. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Are we all good?